to our weekly episode of the Quadcast.
My name is Mariam Lazarovich.
I'm Nicholas Belden.
I'm Maya Lakhani.
And I'm Jacqueline Chris.
In today's episode of Quadcast, we're going to be discussing The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan, which means going into depth about the story itself using formalist, biographic, historical, and gender-critical lenses. Not only will we be doing that in today's episode, but we will also be sharing our personal thoughts on the book, giving our recommendations, and even comparing it to an Oscar-winning film. Make sure to pay attention to this episode, since we will have a fun game for you guys to play and test your knowledge.
My initial thoughts on The Joy Luck Club was that it was an interesting book. It felt like once I picked it up, I couldn't put it back down. I really enjoyed reading this book, especially when it got more in depth about the mother and daughter relationships, which I found intriguing, especially as the story went on. Also, I found the alternating perspectives in each chapter be very entertaining as the reader, since we get to see all sides of the story and you have the chance to resonate with each story without having any bias on any of it. On to you, Maya.
At first glance, I found the Joy Luck Club to be captivating and intriguing, and I like that the story presents Chinese culture and American culture at the same time. I also really enjoyed reading a book with this specific style, since I can relate on a personal level, as my mother herself has experienced the challenges of immigration and has even shared her stories with me. Due to that fact, I've stayed interested in the book ever since I picked it up, and have continued to enjoy it as I've read on. I also resonate with the aspects of having immigrant parents that are discussed within the book, like participating in non-American culture and having tensions revolving around miscommunications and high expectations. Jackie, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the novel.
When I started the Joy Luck Club, I initially thought that it wasn't really for me. Don't get me wrong, it was well written and objectively good, but it just wasn't my type of book. I prefer more action thriller type books since I lose interest easily while reading. I just thought that I would have trouble staying invested in this book since it's more slow paced. However, by the end of the third chapter, I had grown to like it a lot. The different stories were captivating and I definitely become engrossed in the pages. What do you think, Marlon?
When I first opened the Joy Luck Club, I thought it was really interesting from the start. I found it so cool how it introduced the story as Jing Mei having to take over the club and follow her dead mother's footsteps. As I read through the novel, my thoughts changed because I saw how real and raw the relationships were between all of the characters and how each of the characters struggled with their own stories and experiences. All of these emotions just felt so real to me, and it made me feel really drawn to how Amy Tan wrote this novel. So Nicholas, what's this book about?
The Joy Luck Club is a novel about the four daughters of Chinese immigrant parents. This story revolves around Su-Yan Wu, An Mei Su, Lindo Zhang, and Ying St. Clair, who are the four immigrant mothers in the story. The four American daughters are Jingmei Wu, Rose Sue Jordan, Waverly Zhang, and Lena St. Clair. The story begins in Jingmei's perspective, when she takes over the Joy Luck Club from her mother, Su-Yan Wu, after we find out she sadly passed away.
Continuing in Jing Mei's perspective, she finds out that she has two half-twin sisters currently living in China, which she also learns that she is expected to go and visit someday soon. We also learn about the tragic pasts of the mothers through flashbacks that show the loss of children, traditionally arranged marriages, as well as the concept of war. These pasts are later reflected within the daughters' present-day challenges and struggles centered around cultural identity and relationship struggles.
The mothers fail to understand what their daughters are dealing with because of the cultural conflict between the generations. This conflict was shaped because of the generational gap, the sacrifices that the mothers have made for their daughters, and each of their trauma. The middle chapters move away from the mother's stories, which focus on their life in China, and move towards each of the daughters' personal struggles, such as finding their identities, accepting their Chinese heritage, and growing up as young women in America.
For example, Rose Sue Jordan is dealing with her marriage falling apart. Lena St. Clair is stuck in an emotionally abusive marriage, which helps her realize how she inherited her mother's inability to speak up for herself. Waverly Zhang struggles with her mother's constant backhanded comments, which makes her feel like she isn't enough for her mother in her eyes. And Jing Mei is having a hard time with living up to her mother's expectations. As the novel progresses, the tension begins to close in on each of the relationships because the daughters realize what their mothers have gone through.
These ideas are the main points of the book. As it continues to expand on their daughter's sense of not belonging or fitting in with American society, making them each feel detached and isolated from their Chinese heritage and culture. Near the end of the book, Jing Mei finally decides to travel to China and meet her two half-twin sisters, which she then uses to come to peace with her mother Su-Yan Wu, including her culture and overall identity.
This ends the novel with an emotional tone, which highlights the character growth throughout the novel, exploring concepts of culture and eventually coming to an understanding about the entirety of that subject while accepting herself for who she is. Amy Chan decided to write this book in an alternating first-person perspective throughout each chapter of the book, which is necessary so each character can share their story from their own perspectives, which leaves zero room for bias from other characters.
Since there are multiple perspectives, there are also multiple voices telling the story, which lets us as readers explore each of the characters' specific cultural identity and their stories coming from their own voice. Also, Amy Tan decides to keep an emotionally deep tone during the book, which mainly comes in the form of a reflective, melancholy tone. Each of the daughters have been dealing with their own struggles and problems centered around their cultural conflicts, including their relationships with their immigrant mothers.
The structure of the Joy Luck Club loosely resembles the format of a Mahjong game, as it is divided into 4 sections, and within each of those sections, the 4 different stories are being told. Each of these different stories are being told by a different narrator, and from each different perspective, someone may narrate in a completely different way and paint someone else to be good and bad guys from their point of view. The switching of the narrators help us see how one daughter can feel like she's not enough for the mother, but once it switches to the mother's perspective, we are able to see why they feel this way, such as Waverly Zhong and her mother, Lindo.
Waverly Zhong has always struggled with feeling value to her mother, but we learn that Lindo has gone through past trauma, which causes her to be disconnected in the relationship with her daughter. One of the biggest plot lines is the Joy Luck Club itself, which is originally a gathering of the 4 mothers, but when Su-yeon Woo dies near the beginning, her daughter Jing Mei takes over the club and introduces the rest of the daughters back into the club, like how they used to in their youth.
This club occurs once a week and they meet to play a Chinese game called Mahjong, as well as they share their stories and experiences with each other about culture and society. The story alternates between the present timeline and the past timeline, where the present timeline is set in the 1980s in San Francisco, California, while the past timeline with the mothers and their ancestors is set in the 1920s in Guilin, China. Since we get to experience both timelines, we get to see how the daughters feel about their culture in the present versus how the mothers felt back in their time growing up surrounded by the Chinese culture.
Additionally, the story is non-linear since it switches between past and present narratives, mainly in the form of flashbacks, to show the comparison between cultural clash then in China versus the 1980s in the United States. In the past timeline, the narrative expands on the mother's upbringing in China, both before and after immigrating to America, as well as their experience as young immigrant mothers raising children in America. The 3 biggest themes throughout the story consist of the complexities of a mother-daughter relationship, cultural clash and identity, as well as immigration.
The complexities of a mother-daughter relationship include tensions surrounding the mother's high expectations for their daughters to live up to because of the mother's lives beginning in China. These tensions also stem from how the mothers have a completely different set of expectations for themselves, which they then try to pass down to their daughters, but this creates conflict and tension because the mothers fail to realize the differences between growing up in China versus America, and especially in a different time period. Therefore, the mothers have outdated and unrealistic expectations for their daughters due to the gap in cultures and time periods.
This cultural clash results in internal conflicts within the daughters, as they feel they are not living up to their mother's expectations and passing on their Chinese culture, since they are growing up in America versus China. This becomes more of a conflict because of how American society is influencing their perspectives on life, which they are expected to follow traditional Chinese culture. Within this cultural clash, it creates a sense of yearning within the daughters to fit into the American society, while simultaneously living up to their parents' expectations and making them proud.
The mothers also struggle to understand their daughters who are fluent in English, and due to this language barrier, it creates deeper tensions, specifically when trying to communicate and understand their true feelings about each other as well as their opposing culture. The last big theme within the book is about immigration and how it changed the lives of the mothers and continues to affect the daughters' lives in the present timeline. Immigration impacted the lives of the mothers as it highlights the disconnect between American society and Chinese society, and how they have to try to adapt to a new life, or in other words, culturally assimilate.
Because of the wide gap between American society and Chinese society, the mothers can't apply any of their Chinese experiences in America, which leaves them completely alone and blindsided, forcing them to figure out things step by step, without any sense of security. In contrast, the daughters have their mother's newly found American experiences to guide them through their lives, as well as a more modernized society and further advancements to technology in comparison to the 1920s. The 4 mothers, Su-yeon Woo, An Mei Soo, Lindo Zhang, and Ying Sinclair, all had to create their own families based on the little American experiences and knowledge that they had on society, meaning the families made were split between American and Chinese culture.
One of the biggest pieces of symbolism throughout the book is the concept of the Joy Luck Club itself, including the game of Mahjong that they play at their gatherings every week. Mahjong is a game that uses tiles with many different combinations and variations originating from China. Specifically, this game symbolizes community within their group, which is used to further connect the 4 immigrant mothers to create a sense of belonging within each other and help them navigate this new experience together.
The Chinese background surrounding the game also symbolizes the cultural heritage that each of the mothers want to uphold within themselves, and how they want to keep their traditions alive despite being surrounded by American culture. Another symbol lies within the Joy Luck Club, but specifically when Su Yonwu passes away and gives the club to her daughter, Jing Mei. This symbolizes the passing of Chinese heritage within ancestry, and how they strive to keep their traditions alive in a way that everyone can experience them.
Eventually, when all of the mothers who are the original members of the Joy Luck Club pass away, the daughters take their spots in the club, which symbolizes how they come to embrace and accept their Chinese heritage at face value. A third symbol within the book are the unique names of each character and how the names reflect their Chinese value, but more importantly, who they are as characters. Being specific to the character of Jing Mei and how she changes her name to June before the events of the book. This symbolizes how she rejects her Chinese culture and heritage, including her Chinese identity entirely.
Furthermore, the way she wants everyone to know her as June reflects how she only wants to adopt an Americanized version of her identity, and how she rejects her Chinese name rather than embracing it. Her reasoning behind this name change is that she is more focused on fitting in with the American society and feeling like she belongs instead of accepting her roots with Chinese culture. The last example of Amy Tan's usage of literary devices in the Joy Luck Club is through Anmei Su's ghost being a metaphor.
This metaphor is deeply connected to some beliefs in Chinese culture because a ghost can represent someone who feels as if they haven't achieved peace in their lives, which reflects onto why Anmei Su told Rose that she's becoming a ghost because this is how she feels. The ghost is used as a metaphor for restraining your voice and emotions because they choose to stay silent and fade away, like ghosts do. Anmei Su tells her daughter that she's becoming a ghost because she's trying to warn Rose so she doesn't stay quiet like her mother did. Hey Nicholas, tell me more about the background of the author Amy Tan.
Amy Tan is an American novelist born on February 19, 1952 in Oakland, California. The present time in the Joy Luck Club takes place primarily in San Francisco, California, which is close to where Amy Tan was born. Amy Tan went to several different schools, including Linfield University, University of California, Santa Cruz, University of California, Berkeley, Peterson High School, and SJSU. Amy Tan's mother pushed her to pursue the medical field, but Amy Tan abandoned her course in pre-med to pursue English and linguistics. She double majored in English and linguistics and earned a Bachelor of Arts degree. This conflict between Amy Tan and her mother connects to many of the recurring conflicts in the Joy Luck Club.
For example, Jing Mei's mother was persistent in trying to turn Jing Mei into a prodigy. However, despite Su Yan's efforts to make Jing Mei fit her standards, Jing Mei isn't able to meet the difficult standards, no matter how hard she tries. However, being pressured her entire life to meet her mother's crazy expectations didn't benefit her at all. She never felt enough as a child and always compared herself to other children. Amy Tan definitely included this aspect into the book to reflect how she felt about not feeling enough. Before Amy Tan started writing, she was a freelance business writer, worked as a consultant for programs for disabled children, and was an editor for a medical publication.
Some of the famous books that Amy Tan has written consist of The Joy Luck Club, The Kitchen God's Wife, The 100 Secret Senses, Saving Fish from Drowning, and The Valley of Amazement. Her parents, Daisy Lee and John Tan, are Chinese immigrants. The mothers of the Joy Luck Club are also Chinese immigrants with American children in California. Her background undoubtedly influenced the story behind the characters in the Joy Luck Club. Amy Tan's father, John Tan, was an electrical engineer and a Baptist minister. He immigrated to the United States from China to escape the Chinese Civil War. Amy Tan's mother, Daisy Lee, immigrated to the United States from Shanghai in 1949 to escape the communist takeover.
Before she left China, Daisy Lee lost custody of her 3 daughters after divorcing her abusive husband. Amy Tan has 2 brothers named John Tan Jr. and Peter Tan. In 1974, Amy Tan married Lou DeMette, but they don't have any children together. Growing up, Amy Tan's family life was hard. She lost both her brothers and her father when she was a teenager. While these things were happening, her mother still expected very highly of her, which definitely influenced her writing, especially in the Joy Luck Club.
In the source Liberate the Asian American Writer, Embracing the Flaws of Amy Tan's The Joy Luck Club by Ashley Leung, she makes the claim that Amy Tan wrote the book based on her own experiences as an Asian American that struggled having an upbringing with immigrant parents, but also how the book is symbolic and parallels her own life experiences and history regarding the broad subject of Asian American culture. When using the biographical criticism lens, we can see that the source directly resists the concept that Amy Tan should be held responsible for the portrayal of the ideal persona which an Asian American experiences in culture. Since this source defends Tan in this situation, and explains that her unique experiences shape the book, rather than it being based off stereotypes and generalization.
Instead, it supports the idea that for us to understand Tan's unique past, including her tense connection with her mother, her struggle with her Chinese heritage, and her yearning for the simultaneous audience of both American and Asian backgrounds. This provides strong insights within her creative writing choices and ultimately benefits the readers, since it provides a deeper understanding of the novel. Okay, let's now dive into the historical context that the book was written in.
The book, The Joy Luck Club, can be connected to many different historical events that help us understand the novel on a deeper level. One of these events was the Second Sino-Japanese War. The source, Japanese expansion into the South China Sea, colonization and conflict, 1902 to 1939, by Ulysses Granados, explores the expansion of Japan into the South China Sea during the 1930s. In the first chapter of the Joy Luck Club, we are told about how Su Yongwu escaped China by her daughter Jingmei. This chapter describes the brutality of the Sino-Japanese War and why she could no longer stay in China, as well as what she had to leave behind. This helps us understand the struggles that many Chinese immigrants might have faced in their own countries, causing them to leave and come to America.
That's so terrible, Jackie. I can't believe people actually had to go through that. At least they could find refuge in America.
Well, Nicholas, did you know that America wasn't always so welcoming to Chinese people? The Chinese Exclusion Act was passed in 1882, specifically restricting immigration from China. It was repealed in 1943, which is why we saw so many immigrants from China coming to America. This includes all of the mothers who left their homes behind and traveled here from China. If the act had never been repealed, maybe they would have gone to another more welcoming country.
You know what's even more insane? Maybe the book never even would have been written because Amy Tan's parents might have immigrated to another country.
Wow, that really puts things into perspective, Maya. But did you know that another reason so many Chinese people immigrated to America during this time was because America experienced an economic boom after World War II? This contributed to America's prosperity for years to come. Many people from other countries saw this and then migrated to America seeking stability and opportunity. This made America a great place to escape for the mothers since they could raise families and live without the worries they had back in China.
That's very interesting. Thanks for letting me know. Well, now we have discussed why so many Chinese people immigrated to America. However, did you know that one of the reasons the Joy Luck Club was written was because of a shift in Asian American literature in the 1970s and 80s? Writers like Frank Chin, Maxine Hong Kingstong, and David Henry Wang rejected the standard Asian American literature from decades before that reinforced the ideas of assimilation and Western ethnocentrism. This reflected a change in Asian American literature as Asian authors started writing about their experiences as Asian Americans and the discrimination they faced. They also opened up and shared their culture in their writing instead of pushing it aside. Amy Tan became one of these writers who shared her experience as an Asian American, which led to the creation of the Joy Luck Club. What about the social structures in the book, Jackie?
The social structures and systems in the Joy Luck Club are fascinating, particularly in how the cultures are explored throughout the book. The division between generations is showcased, and the process of assimilating into American society is examined. These aspects are all examples of social structures and systems that the Joy Luck Club discusses. The giant division between the generations which causes conflict and disconnection between the mothers and their daughters.
Since the mothers and their daughters grew up in different generations and in different countries with different cultures, many conflicts arise between them. A recurring conflict between the mothers and daughters is that the mothers expect too much of their daughter. Other recurring division factors include language barriers, cultural differences, and past traumatic experiences. In Jingmei's chapters, we get to see how her not being able to meet her mother's expectations affected her in a deeper sense.
Specifically, it affected her self-confidence, gave her unnecessary pressure to be like other girls her age who her mother compared her to, and made her feel unintelligent. Even though her mother tried her best to turn Jingmei into a prodigy, she was unable to, and it only affected Jingmei's life in a negative way. A conflict in the Joy Luck Club regarding a language barrier can be seen in the relationship of Ying Ying St. Clair and her daughter, Lena St. Clair.
Their language barrier makes it difficult to communicate with each other, causing a disconnection between them. A social norm that used to be common in China when Lin Dozhang was younger was arranged marriages. Lin Dozhang was forced to live with a random family at the age of 12. The family didn't treat her well and made her work hard. Once she married the boy that she was arranged to marry, they were forced to start a family. It seemed like there was no escape, but she figured out a loophole to get out of the marriage.
She convinced her mother-in-law that if their marriage didn't break up, her son would die because her mother-in-law is superstitious. Another social structure that was discussed throughout the book was the culture in both America and China. When the mothers immigrated to the United States, they brought their culture with them.
At the Joy Luck Club, the members play the games they would play in China, like mahjong. They would eat Chinese food, etc. Another social structure aspect in the Joy Luck Club was when the characters try to fit into the American culture after immigrating to the United States. For example, in the chapter Half and Half by Rose Sue Jordan, she and her family went to the beach to do quote-unquote American things. What about under a gender lens, Nicholas?
When you look at the Joy Luck Club through a gender-critical lens, it helps us specifically see the gender aspects of the novel and the role that gender plays throughout the book. When we look at each of the characters' stories, it underlines how the gender roles are so much different in Chinese culture versus American culture. An example of lack of sacrifice in women was when Rose Sue Jordan was dealing with her marriage falling apart, and when Lena St. Clair was in an emotionally neglected marriage, but she learned to become more of a free-spirited woman.
Both of these characters are proof of how the women throughout this book struggle to take assertiveness. This highlights how gender inequality was still a prominent issue that affected them. Chinese societal norms and traditions emphasize the issues of gender inequality, especially when it comes to arranged marriages. Chinese social norms and traditions emphasize the issues of gender inequality, especially when it comes to arranged marriages, as the women are expected to conform to all of it, and they cannot reject their mother's expectations.
In Chinese culture, the daughters are expected to be polite young women who can't use their voices or be strong-minded because it's too unladylike in their society's eyes. As the story progresses, we see how the relationships break the traditional norms and break the silence that they endured for so many years. All the characters that went through relationships with possessive men learned how to stay strong through persistence. The trauma that the mothers experienced led to them becoming cold to their daughters and having clouded thoughts about how they should be raising them.
When looking at the novel through this gendered lens, we can see that Amy Tan isn't just criticizing how women are expected to act in Chinese culture, but she also highlights how these societal norms can eventually be broken, and that women don't just have to stay silent through all the pain they endure. Towards the end of the Joy Luck Club, we see how the daughters start to use their voices and become independent young women, showing how Amy Tan believes in defying traditional cultural expectations, specifically for women.
In the source, Analysis of the Gender Conflicts of the Joy Luck Club, by Liwa Chen and Man Xiong, it argues how women are often viewed as inferior in society and how Amy Tan takes those traits that are perceived as less than and reverses them. The article first discusses how men are often perceived as primary caregivers of the household, as they typically go out and earn a living, while women stay at home to do housework and care for the children. The women's role is often seen as minor, but in reality, it is an essential part of the picture.
The article also discusses how Amy Tan used the first-person narrative point of view to uplift women and tell their stories, rather than how women are normally silenced in society. Lastly, the article speaks of how the different stories of the women in the Joy Luck Club all come together to make a communal voice. The communal voice also helps uplift women and highlight their similar struggles from different points of view, making their voices more impactful. Now let's compare it to the Oscar-winning film Everything Everywhere All at Once.
The novel The Joy Luck Club can be compared to the film Everything Everywhere All at Once. In this novel, Amy Tan goes into depth about the complexities of a mother-daughter relationship, the struggles with cultural identity, navigating through immigration, and the generational gaps. All of these themes are also touched in the film Everything Everywhere All at Once.
The mother in the film, Evelyn Wang, is an immigrant from China, and her daughter, Joy, has difficulties accepting her Chinese culture. Joy feels like she isn't enough for her mother because of the way Evelyn is unaffectionate towards her own daughter. This parallels the Joy Luck Club because all the daughters have similar relationships to this.
Jing Mei finds it difficult to understand her mother, Su Yan Wu, and feels like she isn't fit for her expectations. Rose Sue Jordan and her mother, An Mei, have a complicated relationship because of the emotional distance and lack of using each other's voice. Waverly Zhang has always tried to gain her mother's approval, but Lindo isn't an affectionate mother because of her past trauma.
Each of these complex relationships can be compared to the film Everything Everywhere All at Once because both of them circle around feeling misunderstood and neglected. Although the film is set in real life, where the film is set in a different universe, they both share the same themes and the same overall message, that is, the relationship between a mother and a daughter can heal.
Now, it's time to hear everyone's recommendations, starting with Jackie.
Despite my initial thoughts, I really enjoyed this book. I think it's best for people who specifically are into literary fiction. Like I said earlier, the genre of books that I usually like to read are action thriller books, so this was a different experience for me. However, I did grow to enjoy it the more I read. I'd give this book 4 out of 5 fortune cookies. What's your opinion, Mayon?
I honestly would recommend this book to anyone because I feel like I really connected with the complex mother and daughter relationships throughout the novel. I struggle with my own relationship with my mom, but I know that her and I will end up being much closer one day when I'm older. So seeing that happen in the book gave me a sense of comfort. I give this book also 4 out of 5 fortune cookies. What about you, Nicholas?
I enjoyed reading The Joy Luck Club, and I would recommend it to other people. I think the fact that we can see everyone's perspective in each chapter is something that many people would enjoy. If you enjoy reading about different cultures, the reality of some relationships, and real-life struggles, this is definitely going to be a fun read for you. I'd give this book 4.5 out of 5 fortune cookies. On to you, Maya.
Yes. I would 100% recommend for anyone to read this book. I was the one that chose this book for my group to read because I was hooked onto it ever since I read the synopsis. Everything about this book has kept me attached, and I don't usually enjoy reading, so I think many people would like it. I give the Joy Luck Club 5 out of 5 fortune cookies. Time for our game.
Welcome to the game show part of our podcast where we see if you have been listening to what we've been talking about. We're going to ask you 5 questions about the Joy Luck Club, and if you're right, you'll get a prize.
The first question is, where did all of the mothers grow up? Is it A, Taipei City, Taiwan, B, Tokyo, Japan, C, Guilin, China, or D, Seoul, Korea? If you said option C, Guilin, China, you're correct. Good job.
Number 2 is, who is the founder of the Joy Luck Club? Is it A, Ying St. Clair, B, Lindo Zhang, C, An Mei Su, or D, Su Yan Wu? And the answer is option D, Su Yan Wu.
Number 3 is true or false. The Joy Luck Club plays bingo every week. And the answer is false. They play mahjong every week.
Question 4 is, what does the ghost represent? Is it A, a dead person, B, restraining your voice, C, trauma, or D, darkness? If you said option B, restraining your voice, then you're correct.
And the fifth and final question for you guys is, which is not a reoccurring theme throughout the book? Is it A, complexities of a mother and daughter relationship, B, romance, C, cultural clash and identity, or D, immigration? If you said option B, which is that romance is not a reoccurring theme throughout the book, then you're correct.
We hope this quiz was a fun review for you guys, and that it helped you remember some key points of our podcast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Quadcast where we analyzed the Joy Luck Club. We hope you enjoyed it.
Hopefully you guys got to learn more about Amy Tan's novel titled The Joy Luck Club.
And if you're not already on your way to the bookstore now, then what are you waiting for?
Make sure to stay tuned for our next episode coming soon. We can't wait.
Bye, guys.